Good afternoon, everyone. I am Anthony King, Research Associate in Peace and Security at the Gulf Policy Institute of the Dennis and Ledora Forager Foundation. And it's my delight to welcome you to this webinar where we will be appraising the role of think tanks in peacebuilding in Africa. And for this webinar, we are delighted to have as the moderator Mr. Francis Tazwaja, who is the Director of the Peace and Security Division at the Gulf Policy Institute. Mr. Francis Tazwaja, you have the floor for your preliminary remarks before we get into the session. Over to you, Francis.
Thank you very much, Anthony. Thank you for the presentation. Dear panelists, participants, it's a pleasure to welcome you to this grandiose event, which we organized on the title Appraising the Role of Think Tanks in Peacebuilding in Africa. Think tanks have very index of peace Africa, focus on broad range of peace, security, governance, and development issues. However, African think tanks face several structural adequate funding and limited collaboration with the African Union and regional economic communities in Africa. To address this, on the February 8, 2023, the African Union officially launched the network of think tanks for peace in Africa, with objectives to drive the partnership between African research community and African Union Department of Political Affairs, Peace and Security on governance, peace and security issues. Its affairs, or it is against this backdrop that the Peace and Security Division of the Gulf Policy Institute is organizing to appraise the role of think tanks in the process of peace building in Africa. Secondly, the Gulf Policy Institute has also been trying to galvanize resources and make or create awareness to the African continent and peace builders, stakeholders on issues regarding the contribution of think tanks in peace building in Africa. With that light, the Gulf Policy Institute, in partnership with the Open Society Foundation, came up with a project titled Promoting Women's Rights, Accountability, Security, and Integrated Governance in ECAS region, which ECAS is already a REC, which is part of the other RECs and African Union. This was done under the following goals, which means the project has the following goals: to promote women's rights, accountability, security, and integrated governance within the ECAS region. So within this backdrop, we will be discussing on the role think tanks actually could play to enhance peace building in Africa. So the African Union and other stakeholders like Open Society Foundation know that think tanks have a great role to play. So in that light, the Gulf Policy Institute has invited great minds who have the in-depth knowledge about peace and security issues in Africa. First and foremost, I'm going to introduce to you our two great panelists, not a great esteemed panelists. It is said, ladies before gentlemen. I will begin by introducing to you Madame Eugenia Kagitesi. Madame Kagitesi is the Executive Director of the Institute of Policy Analysis and Research, IPA, based in Kigali, Rwanda. She is an advisory member of the African Portal and a member of the Board of Directors of the Commercial Bank of Africa in Rwanda. She sits on the National Independent Review Panel, NIRP, for Rwanda Public Procurement Authority. She is for Peace Building Strategic Committee. She has worked with public, private, and civil society organizations focused on capacity building, organizational development, policy analysis, and research. She is an honored graduate of social sciences from Makerere University with an MBA from Maastricht School of Management in the Netherlands. She's pursuing her PhD degree in business administration, specializing in strategic management from Jomo Kenyatta University. Next is His Excellency, Professor Mohamed Loliki. Professor Loliki was a Moroccan ambassador to the United Nations in Geneva and New York. He is currently a fellow at Policy Center for the New South, a renowned think tank in Morocco and Africa. He is also a professor at Mohammed II Polytechnic University in Rabat, Morocco. Lady and Your Excellency, you are welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
I want to first and foremost thank you for honoring our invitation and to make Africa and the world know what contributions Africa can bring in bringing other stakeholders in promoting peace, security, and governance, not only in individual countries or in the regional communities, but in Africa. I want to first and foremost ask Madame Eugenia, before we begin, can you tell our audience what think tanks are and how could they contribute in shaping our societies?
Okay, thank you very much, Francis. I hope you understand me. Thank
Very
you for
well.
your, first of all, thank you for your invitation to be a part of this wonderful panel and a part of this wonderful discussion about peace and security in Africa and the role of think tanks. And thank you for your big introduction that you have just introduced us to the audience. And yes, thank you. Yeah, think tanks, I think like many of you would know, think tanks are organizations that seek to influence policy making with research, policy analysis, advocacy, and a number of issues. So these organizations seek to produce evidence that really influence policy and that really seek to influence and inform policy making in different countries. And think tanks are catalysts of ideas, innovation, and actions that really support and inform policy that influence the lives of our people. The second part of your question, Francis, was that the role of think tanks. Yes, like I previously mentioned.
Yeah, the second part of my question was how can think tanks contribute in shaping our societies?
Yes. Like I said, these are really knowledge-based organizations. They produce ideas, they produce innovations, they produce actions, and these actions are really geared to influence policy making in the country and to have the policies that are informed by evidence. So the evidence is very key for, for influencing shaping the lives of the people, shaping the governments, shaping, the government decisions. And so this is what think tanks do. I know we produce papers, we publish, and we produce evidence like on policy briefs and dialogues with the policymakers. So these are very key to decision makers, to policy makers, to the peace and security makers in Africa to have really informed decisions. I would say that, Francis, thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Madam. I move now to Your Excellency, Professor Mohamed. Apart from serving as catalyst for ideas and helping to shape the policy agenda, what other roles do you think tanks can play in building peace in Africa? Prof, you have the right, or you wish to express yourself in French, you are welcome.
First of all, thank you very much, Francis, for taking this initiative that comes immediately after the establishment of this grouping of more influential think tanks in Africa that have been solicited to assist the African Union institution and its member state in terms of sharing their knowledge, their expertise, and the role that they are playing as an intermediary between the policymakers and civil societies. Secondly, we all agree that peace and security is a noble objective, but at the same time, it's something difficult to achieve and very complex to transform. And in this field, I think that the think tanks have a very crucial role to play. Now, in terms of trying to complement what my colleague and friend Eugenia said about the role of think tanks in Africa, let me begin by saying that there are two issues that really have an impact on the role of think tanks in Africa and on their impact on public policies. I'm talking about the independence of think tanks, and I'm talking about the funding, and two are interrelated. The two elements are interrelated. And I think that you can judge the value added of a think tank, because we have to admit that not all the think tanks are one size fits all. So each one has its influences, each one have its conception and idea about the role that they will be playing in a given society. And this role is shaped not only by the two elements that are indicated, but also by the environment, national, regional, and international environment. Let me list very, very quickly, because we are compared with the time pressure, the 2 minutes. Let me go very quickly. First, I think the first role is to engage civil society in the debate of ideas and get them involved. Secondly, serving as intermediary between civil societies and decision makers to assert the contribution of civil society and include them in public policies. Three, convincing the policymakers of the relevance, utility, and the capacity of think tanks to bring something new. 4 or 5, understanding the root causes of peace, security, the culture of violence, and try to really to bring something that enlighten the public policies. 6, mapping the sources of input from civil society to be directed and conveyed to public policy makers. Another one would be, it's extremely also important, it's rather technical, the role of think tanks to generate data on which the decision makers can build their decisions. Another one is to make the government in touch with the reality through the civil society. And maybe just 2 additional ones. One is to really contribute to the establishment of a culture of peace. And the last one, and I will stop there, some of the think tanks, including the one I'm representing, we contribute to training and enhancing the capacities of civil servants, of head of enterprises that need to have an interdisciplinary perception of the problem. So I will stop at that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Thank you, Madam. I think think tanks, from the summary of what you said, actually are becoming so renowned nowadays. That is why I earlier said on the 8th, up to the moment where stakeholders rely on think tanks to foster the agenda. That's why in Addis in February, some renowned think tanks were invited, which all of us in this panel were present, to put them in place to organize in seeing that think tanks play a major role in promoting peace and security governance in Africa. Equally, the Open Society Foundation also saw the role that think tanks could play in building peace, promoting women's and activities and governance, have also been trying to fund some other organizations like done to the Gafu Policy Institute. That is a great milestone which we look forward for other donors, for other stakeholders to put in place to make sure that think tanks actually have their place not only in Africa, but in the world. Thank you very much for actually highlighting and making our participants and all this know what think tanks are all about, because I think not many people do not even know what think tanks actually are. Thank you very much. Now we move to the second set of our questions. I will again begin with Madam Eugenia. To what extent are the decisions of public officials reflective of the knowledge generated by think tanks as far as peace building is concerned? You actually have expertise in public, private kind of settings, so you should be able to help me and the other participants who are listening to us have some knowledge about what we are asking. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Francis. I want to actually touch on what my colleague Mohammed has just said, the issue of independence. I think the independence is very crucial to think tanks if we want to influence policy and if we want to really have impact on the policies that are being made by the policymakers. And so most of us, of course, remain independent, and what we produce is independent. So to what extent, I must say it depends. It varies in different countries or different policymakers, but I know most policymakers, most decision makers are really out for independent evidence that inform what they are doing. So to a bigger extent, I know the policymakers are really looking for this evidence. They want to know, to hear a second voice, because they take decisions, they implement their decisions, but a number of times they want also to hear from a different view, a different point of other people that are really speaking from evidence, from research. And so I must say, not to a bigger, there's need for scaling up the uptake of research of think tanks. And I know governments use most, for example, in Rwanda, we have worked on a number of projects.
Au Rwanda, nous avons travaillé pour un nombre de projets et nous avons produit des impacts, nous avons vu des groupes de réflexion qui assistent à implémenter avec le gouvernement. Nous pouvons obtenir des informations directes. Et à ce moment, alors si vous marchez en partenariat, même quand vous êtes très indépendant, vous devez connaître le contenu, vous devez marcher, vous devez travailler avec les décideurs, et si vous n'êtes pas proche de vous, ne pouvez pas les influencer. Alors oui, je ne sais pas si respecte l'optique de la recherche pour pouvoir influencer les décideurs. Alors, nous avons besoin de dialoguer, nous avons besoin de tenir des conférences. Alors, c'est ce que je peux dire, M. Francis. J'aimerais continuer avec une question. Oui, les réflexions font beaucoup. Même comme certaines personnes diront que
difficulties in
Nous
which
travaillons avec les groupes de réflexion et nous connaissons les difficultés auxquelles ils font face dans les différents pays.
When there's peace, when there's governance, we lay the basis in which sustainable development can grow. So maybe it depends maybe on different countries. From my own experience as a practitioner, what do you think these think tanks can contribute?
As in the peace building?
In the peace building and governance.
Yes. Yeah, for example, what I was talking about, the performance evaluation, those
Je
are
parlais de la performance, l'évaluation, ceux qui veulent contribuer dans des problèmes de gouvernance.
The African Union is coming up with, and
La
this one is
consolidation de la paix. Ici, il va également dans les différents départements sur les problèmes.
I was you are aware at the time, the vice president, one of the vice presidents for the network, and we've been actually having meetings, online meetings, to prepare for the Net for Peace. And one of the plans that the network is going to really be planning is to have dialogues with the different policymakers at an African level, hubs, department, and we shall be having presentation of deliverables that inform policy and they look into a conflict. I must say that the conflict in Africa hasn't really been resolved by different state actors, governments, and other negotiators. So we are looking at the academicians, at policymakers. I mean the research dialogues that know the context to inform this peace building on the ground. And I mean, we shall be having also papers, different think tanks will be producing papers that will inform different governments on peace. And they shall have even closed door sessions on issues that are affecting Africa, especially on peace, closed door sessions with the policymakers, but of course, based on evidence. We will not be coming up with things. So there will be need for intensive research, there will be need for intensive publications, intensive, directed meetings that are looking at particular issues that affect Africa. And I believe this one is going to be even having a bigger impact on the way decisions are made on Africa. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Madam. Prof, Your Excellency, your titles, how many, whatever I bring forward, just thank you very much. In early February, the African Union invited some of renowned think tanks in Africa, including the Carrefour Policy Institute in Yaoundé, Cameroon, the Institute of Policy Analysis and Research, IPA. What do you think these think tanks can contribute in shaping peace and security agenda in Africa? And in doing that, I earlier said other stakeholders like Open Society Foundation are giving financial support in saying that we popularize or we think that should work earnestly in arriving at these goals or achieving these objectives.
Okay, thank you. Well, first of all, let me just acknowledge the fact that the African Union, and particularly the Commissioner for Political Affairs and Peace and Security, took a very important and very timely initiative by inviting those of the African think tank that have a say in addressing the multi-dimensional topic of peace and security. And I think that the 3 days of meeting that we had were surprisingly productive, because we managed in 2 days not only to establish the institution, but even to agree on the procedures, on the chairmanship, on a lot of things. I think this goes to say that when we Africans decide to do something and do it seriously and invest in terms of energy and time, we always manage to come, I will not say with miracles, but we happen to very rationally and efficiently the time that we are allocated. And this group of think tank, I think, needs, first of all, to be consisting of really those think tank that have really a substantive contribution in terms of peace and security in all its dimensions, whether it's peacemaking, peacekeeping, or peace building. Second thing is that I think that this initiative was taken by the African Union. We have, as an African think tank, to reciprocate. We can reciprocate by our respective contribution, but we can also reciprocate by initiatives. And I think the taking of today's initiative by Francis is one token of the commitment of this group of think tank, really to build on the momentum that was created in February. Can we do miracles? No. But can we have a meaningful contribution to the policy making of peacekeeping and peace building? Definitely yes. I think that we have a wealth of empirical experience, a wealth of lessons learned, whether we are coming from a country that unfortunately experienced conflict or not. But I think that we do have a wealth of information, a wealth of finding, a wealth of data, a wealth of ideas that only have to be aggregated and have to be synthesized in a way that could be seen as an interesting contribution. To keep the attention of the African Union institutions and partners on the focus on the work of African think tanks will consist of these think tanks to be faithful to their mission and to their role. Being fact-based institutions. Secondly, see our role as a very humble and very modest, because we are not living in societies that are used, one, to share information, especially key information. Secondly, I think we have a tendency to pretend that we know everything and that we don't need a think tank to come and teach us what to do in terms of public policy. So I think, again, these two resistance, I think we have really to be extremely diplomatic, to go easy, and to use our network within the different sectors of public policies in order to attract sympathy, then to attract interest, then to attract the acknowledgement. Now, let me stop at that.
Okay, thank you very much for that insightful contribution, Your Excellency. Think tanks cannot do miracles, as you've said. It needs a contribution from other stakeholders, funders, governments, regional organizations like the Regional African Committee for Africa, and the African Union itself. Maybe final from you is, how can we bridge the gap between knowledge produced by think tanks and decision of policymakers in Africa, especially the African Union?
Is it me? Are you asking?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm just finding out from you what we can do.
Francis is an excellent diplomat. He decided to grant absolute priority to ladies.
No. This time I give it back to you, Mohammed.
I'm not challenging his priority. I'm the last one to challenge him on this.
Okay, okay. For sure. Francis, can you please repeat the question?
Well, I just wanted to find out what we, like think tanks, can do, or what can be done to bridge the gap between knowledge produced by think tanks, because we will be producing knowledge based evidence as African Union expressed from us. How do we bridge that gap between the knowledge production and policy making? Because we'll produce knowledge and then we try to bring that knowledge produced to policymakers so that they can affect change in our communities, in our societies, in our Africa, so that peace and development governance can reign. Because we have been talking about African solutions to African problems. We need to look for our own solutions to our own problems.
Okay, thank you very much, Francis. I will say, and of course, Mohammed will support me because think tanks need to know that we need support. We need to support each other. So I think I had touched on an issue of what the Net for Peace network, African Network for Peace, is going to do. One thing is for sure, we all have work, good paperwork, good ideas, good innovations, good things that we regularly produce, especially on peace, and we look at what is happening. But how do we actually come close to the decision makers? Because at the end of the day, if these decisions are not implemented by the right people, then they remain in our drawers. And so this is what I was saying, that we need to increase the number of dialogues, focused dialogues with the decision makers, with the, peacemakers, with the, people that are really influential on issues that are pertaining to peace and security in Africa. We need to be close to the policymakers through dialogues. We need to have, presentations, like I said. We need to have closed sessions. I like the idea of having, the African Union people coming up with a think tank, a network, and this network should be the catalyst to really drive some of these good ideas to the policymakers and the decision makers in the African Union. And, policymakers do not read, these big reports. They don't have time for that. How do we become innovative in producing, knowledge that is usable, that can reach them easily, that can be implemented by them easily and be read by them easily? At the end of the day, this peace and security is for our people, it's for the African people, and we need to move down and link the policymakers with the people on the ground to hear the ideas. And if they make decisions that are really coming from bottom, not top-up decisions, then I think we shall have impact on the ground. This is what I can say, Francis. I think Mohammed can add on this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Madam, for that precise and excellent contribution you just made. Mohammed, sorry, diplomacy is what we all seek to make peace building most effective. It's not the only diplomacy from Francis, it's a diplomacy that the careful policies has, that gender interaction, gender balance, gender equity is the rule, or is the bone of rule. That's what we have at the Carrefour Policy Institute. Prof, before you, maybe you have something to add to what Madam said. Considering the fairly democratic nature of most African regimes, do you think think tanks should actively engage in lobbying and activism if they truly want to influence public policy, especially in the domain of peace building?
Well, let me say something first before going into substance. You never ask a diplomat that has more than 40 years if he has something to add, because he is always tempted to add something, just to demonstrate that he can be useful. And I think that honestly, most what I wanted to say has been eloquently made by our sister. Maybe I can go into maybe one or two details just to prove that I can be relevant in this discussion. I think if we want really to bridge the gap of knowledge between civil society and public policies, I think first of all, we have to keep our independence. Because if you want to be credible, as far as civil society is concerned, you have to be independent. You cannot be submitted to any influence, whether from the private sector or the public sector. Secondly, by being independent, you have some kind of social, moral, political pressure on the policymaker. The third one, I would say that the influence is directly linked to the quality of the output of the think tank. If you have some kind of consistency on a given domain, for example, peace building or peace and security or peace and security nexus and development, you will be seen as one, if not the expert in this domain, as the government and policymakers cannot afford not to pay attention to what you are producing. Attention from think tank to be paid to the priorities that are set not only by the government, but also by the African Union institution, whether they are the regional commissions or the commission itself. This is also adds momentum and relevance to the work of the, and of course, a lot of lobbying, discreet lobbying, but lobbying works. And I think that it is within the responsibility of our respective governments, because we are living in developing countries, that we have just a certain idea about independence. There is no think tank in any country, including the United States and others, that is not affiliated to a given institution. When you talk about Stanley Foundation, you know what kind of output you will have. When you see the IFRI or you will see the Institut Montaigne, you know exactly. When you go to Brookings Institute, when you, etc., etc. Okay? So let's not be criticized because we are not independent. Secondly, we don't have really a decent number of think tanks in Africa. We are very few. And I think that quality always comes with quantity. And there is a responsibility of our respective government to do something maybe contradictory. It is, if you have a civic education, the decision makers have to support financially those think tanks that want to be independent. It's not contradictory. You can sometimes hate what you are producing, but deep inside you, you acknowledge that there is some merit in this critique, and I have to take it into consideration. And I think it's this mixture of a relative independence, quality of the final product by think tanks, and also solidarity between think tanks of the same country or the same region. Because we have a tendency, maybe sometimes, because of this kind of competition, maybe to do some dirty tricks that I think we have to elevate our way and our ethics to the extent that we see each other as complementing each other rather than competing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Just in a minute, please. What contributions can you think the African regional institutions, that is the African Union and the REX and member states, can make in assisting think tanks achieve this goal in order to meet up with the African Union Agenda 2063?
Well, maybe first of all, identify within the structure of the REX and the African Union somebody who will be the liaison officer between African think tanks and the institution. That's one. Secondly, for the REX and the African Union and its member states, to have an open mind about what the think tanks has to say. Because if you don't have open mind, regardless of the quality of what you are going to produce, I'm not going to pay attention to that. I will always dismiss it even before reading it. So I think that to have some kind of open-mindedness is something that is interesting. Three, I think that also the government and the authorities have to acknowledge that think tanks has a role to play. Civil society in its massive numbers cannot play this role because it is impossible. It's like democracy in the very literal word or sense of the word. You cannot decide if you are 36 million people, you cannot decide between 36 million. You have to have some kind of structure that will be acting on behalf of. And I think what the political and the peace and security commissioner did by appointing this strategic group is exactly to promote this idea of a good, consistent and regular interaction between the African institutions and this very important group of African think tanks.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. I think that is one of the initiatives that the Open Society Foundation actually has thought of and is assisting the Carrefour Policy Institute in seeing how the think tanks can foster the promotion of women's rights, accountability, security, and integrated governance in the ECAS region, not only in Cameroon, but the ECAS region. ECAS is also a REX, that's a regional economic community for Africa, which actually caters about issues that concern the Central African sub-region. Thank you very much. Now we'll go to the last question, 2 minutes per each panelist. I will begin with Prof, even though he's been talking for long. What are your main recommendations for stakeholders to work in synergy in building peace and enhance good governance in order to build Africa, the Africa we want?
Is it Mohammed, myself?
Mohammed, talk. I want to strike the balance now.
No. You have to be consistent.
Okay,
priority
madam.
Priority. Okay, there is no exception.
Okay. Eugenia, can you pick up?
No, actually, I want to go back on what African Union can do briefly. I know a number of African think tanks are struggling with funding. Funding has become an issue. Mohammed talked of quality of research. Getting quality researchers is an issue also for major think tanks. Previously, I think we had something called PIC on African continent, or Policy Institute Committee, that was really composed of African think tanks. But now that they no longer get funding, their sustainability is in question. And so we need, first of all, we need to secure sustainable funding for think tanks. We need to ensure quality of our work that we produce. And all this will need really money, and they will need the resources, both in human and of course financial. So this is very key. And again, the coordination part, I like the idea of Mohammed that he talked about the coordination and the linkage to African Union. So if we are to produce the work that influences policy, we need to really produce, to have enough funding for our think tanks. And we don't have to have the insecurities of not existing today, tomorrow you think of dying, another one thinks of closing doors. We need to really look at a way that we can move away from the donor reliance to our independence, like we said. So the last question was which one? Sorry.
The last question was way forward. 1 minute, we are running out of time. What are your main recommendations? What are your main recommendations for stakeholders to work in synergy in building peace, to enhance good governance in order to build the Africa we want?
Okay, I think the main recommendation is to link the, there's need for linkage between the policymakers and the citizens, our people. We need to make bottom-up decisions and that are informed by research, by policy analysis, and by dialogues, like we said, by training. He talked about training. So a lot of things that need to be strengthened and, scaled up, like I started saying. So I give the floor to my brother, Mohammed.
Okay, thank you very much for being time conscious.
Thank you, Virginia, for your invitation to me to add something again. I think in terms of recommendation, I would say that the first one towards the policymakers is to trust the think tank first.
Mhm.
Or, well, if you don't want to trust me, at least give me the benefit of doubt until I prove to you that I am I deserve your confidence. Then you can trust me. So I think this improvement of relation between the policymakers and their interest in think tank is something that might appear as something very peculiar or very simple, but I think it's the cornerstone of everything that will come after that. The second one is about information, because we base everything on information, except the key informations that we cannot have. So I think a smooth exchange of information between the authorities or their institutions in statistic and data and all these kind of things, and think tanks will empower the think tanks to really produce something that is relevant to the public policy. And I think that this relation between the policymakers and the think tanks doesn't come from a vacuum. It has to be seen in a context of the society, because you cannot have a good relation between think tanks and the policymakers if you don't have a strong civil society. And to have a strong civil society, you have to create the conditions for this strong society. And the conditions are minimum, and I underline the word minimum, of rule of law, respect of the freedom of expression, the possibility to get key informations, some kind of duty of the administration to share their the data and information about the think tank. This would be my recommendation. The last one, when it comes to African institutions, we will also appeal to them to trust the think tanks and give them the opportunity, regular opportunities, to prove that they can be useful to African institutions. So I will stop at that.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Thank you, Madam Eugenia, for these wonderful contributions you've made. You've opened minds, you've informed and built a lot of knowledge in the minds of our panelists. Now, we will now move to the next part of our discussion. I will give the floor to Anthony to pick up from there. Question and answers. Please, Anthony, can you take on?
Thank you. Thank you very much.
2-3 minutes will be enough.
Thank you very much, Francis. And I want to congratulate you for the quality of your moderation. I equally want to say a massive thank you to Professor Mohammed and to Mrs. Eugenia for your insights. I think the reactions from the participants in the chat box can speak for themselves. We have a series of questions, but due to time, we might not take all of them. So I want to start with this. It's not addressed to anybody specifically, but I'll leave it for Francis or anyone who wants to take. We have a question from Mr. Wingo Marcel. He's asking, are there any concrete cases of think tanks directly contributing to peace building in Africa? If yes, can it be cited, or are we just talking about the future? The floor is over to you, Francis.
Thank you very much for that question. And because of time constraint, I would just want to maybe use maybe 30 seconds to highlight what Nkafu Policy Institute has been doing. Sometimes our work may not actually be run on radio for propaganda or whatever we do. I would think that Nkafu Policy Institute has done a lot, even though it's doing a lot behind with regards to the ongoing crisis in Cameroon, especially in the Anglophone region, where for the past 6 years, we have been struggling with the separatists who actually are looking forward for a separate country. We've done a lot, and our work must not actually be broadcast every moment we take a step. Presently, we are coming up with a document which may enhance any other stakeholder who wants to know the inside of what the Nkafu Policy Institute is doing with regards to conflict resolution, not only in Cameroon, but in Africa. We've done a lot of policy recommendations, not only with that regard, but with other conflicts in Africa. So if you go to our website, you will see a lot of what we have written, a lot of what we call policy briefs that will try to resolve problems that actually are trying to bring down our African continent and try to frustrate the African Union Agenda 2063. More of what we have is on our website. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Francis. And we have a few minutes for, I think this is going to be the last question, lest I'm mistaken. I would like to put this to either Prof or Mrs. Eugenia. Someone is curious to know, just like myself, because the tendency usually is that states do have a lot of influence in the operationalization of think tanks. And someone's asking, what do we do, or what do think tanks do to block or to limit this interference and influence from states? Maybe Prof would like to take that. Thank you, Prof. I can see your hand up. Thank you, Prof.
Yes. I think this is a question that was posed by Christelle Nadej. She put two questions. One about the funding, the origin of funding, and the other one is how to limit the influence. So I'm going to combine both of them.
You have the floor, Prof. Go ahead.
Okay. How to limit the influence of states? As I indicated earlier, you can limit, but you cannot eliminate. Let's just be extremely realistic. It doesn't exist in any country. So let's not set our mind on this division that all think tanks that are in the north are extremely independent, they don't interfere, etc. And those in the south, in the global south, especially in Africa, or influence, they don't have any utility, etc. That's not, I think each and every think tank in a given country has its own specificities and status. Now, how you can limit the influence? I said that first you have to be productive in terms of quality. Because when you have qualitative production, you are seen by the academia, by the civil society, by the experts, and sometimes even by foreign experts as being objective, very accurate, and very relevant. And we all know in our African countries, when you have a compliment from outside your country, it's a little bit much better than the one that you are receiving from your own country. So to limit, you have to strive to continue to be independent. Secondly, I think it has also something to do with the leadership of the think tank. You have to have a leadership that is, first, can take a lot of heat, a lot of criticism, yet he or she will continue on the path of doing its utmost to be independent and to produce something that is relevant to the civil society and for the public good, that is peace and peace and security. To limit also your influence will consist, for example, to diversify your funding. If your funding is coming part of some sectors of the government, parts from the public, from the private sectors, parts from some other stakeholders, excluding the foreign stakeholders, because if something is coming from outside, it's always be seen in a very negative and detrimental to your sovereignty and to your independence. So that's the first one. The funding origin, and I think I touched on this aspect on my first answer. It can come from the banks, it can come from enterprises, it can come from institutions that see, those who see that your production, your analysis, your ideas are worth looking at, and they can bring something that is out of the box, something unconventional solutions or unconventional path of a solution. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. And on this note, I think we come to the end of the question and answer session. I will hand over back to the moderator, Mr. Francis Tazwacha, to proceed with the closing remarks. Francis, over to you.
Can I just add just 1 second?
Okay, Your Excellency.
I cannot monopolize all the answers to all the questions myself. If Eugenia is not responding at least to one, I will not allow Francis.
Let me respond to the last one, Mohammed. I actually was listening to the limiting the influence and the independence. We actually talked about the independence from the start, but what independence are we talking about? I think the independence of opinion matters a lot. If our opinion is very independent in whatever we do, then it matters. So we are not limiting the influence of policymakers only, but even of funders. Sometimes we produce work that is really in line with what funders are looking for. So we need to be independent, fully independent. But again, if you want to influence policy, you cannot limit, your closeness to the policy. You have to be close to the people that you want to influence. So if you're very far from them, then you won't be able to influence and to impact change on the ground. So this is what I can say, especially on the limiting of the influence. Our opinion needs to be independent. Our work needs to be of quality. Our researchers need to be really trained, but how do we get the opinion that is very independent, the evidence-based to be such? But I think that's what I could say on that, on that point. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Thank you, Madam Eugenia, for this great contribution you have made today to open the minds of our panelists, of our participants and stakeholders. I also want to thank earnestly the Open Society Foundation for the financial support that they gave the Nkafu Policy Institute to organize such events. And we have many more events in line, which are supported by the Open Society Foundation. Because of time constraint, our esteemed participants, your time you actually share with us is so wonderful. And we look forward to seeing you again. On the 21st of June, 2023, the Peace and Security Division of the Nkafu Policy Institute is organizing a forum, Nkafu African Forum, on the theme Human Security and Strategic Peace Building for Sustainable Development in Africa. I will keep you updated for this event so that you can also be part of it and contribute in seeing how we can shape our continent, Africa. Thank you very much once again. Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Your Excellency. Over to you.
Thank you, Mohammed. Thank you, Prof. Thank you, everyone. Kafu, we thank you, Anthony and
Francis. Thank you, Mrs.
And the panelists and the members. We thank you.
And all the participants, we thank you so much. Thank you.
Participants. We were talking about the participants. I actually met Dear Carrier. Dear Carrier was one of our program at in ASB, and we are happy to meet him on the online.
Thank you. Thank you for joining, madam. Thank you. All right, you're welcome.
Okay, thank you. Bye.